Good evening, good people. You're watching Bradley Entertainment. I am joined with the lovely Kitty. Kitty, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Happy Wednesday. Happy
Happy
hump
Wednesday.
day.
Happy hump day to you. And we have a lovely new guest, TikTok creator, the lovely Andrew. Andrew, how are you today, sir?
Yeah, very well indeed. Nice sunny day and in good company with you two. So very well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Obviously, Andrew, I just suggested, the reason why I wanted to get you on is I love some of your videos. You don't just put your opinion out there and just say, look, this is it, accept as it is, no facts, no substance to what you're saying. It's all facts, and you put it down there in front of people in their faces. So theoretically, they shouldn't be able to argue with you. They should just do the fact checking and then see that you're right. But unfortunately, that's not how social media works. Social media, people get angry with what you people. It's all about feelings and anger and stuff. Let's just start with you, Andrew. Let's just start a little bit about yourself, sir. What made you come over to the social media world?
How I saw things was I've worked very internationally. I myself have a very mixed background. I've got an English dad. My mum's from the West Indies, and I was born in Norway, and I lived in Norway until I was 7. So I used to ski to school when I was young.
Marvelous.
So very, very mixed background. Also, I've lived in 4 countries. So I've lived in Norway for 7 years. I've lived in Germany. I've lived in France, and obviously I've lived in the UK. And I've spoken the language in every single country that I have lived in. So on the basis of that, certain feelings come to me when people talk about integration, for example. And how I joined the social media platform was basically I've had a big criticism for years that the media always like to polarize society. You have to be either pro Brexit or pro Remain. You have to be pro lockdown or anti lockdown, pro vaccination, etc. Now we've got similar things going on where people are either saying let's blame immigrants for everything and or let's blame the rich for the state of Britain. I try and take a more balanced approach. So I felt, and I'm getting a lot of positive feedback, that a lot of people actually want a balanced approach to things where you're informed of a lot of facts and what the different viewpoints are. And then you come to quite a balanced viewpoint because I see a big danger. Sort of the two loud factions in the UK are people are either blaming the rich for all their problems or blaming immigrants for all their problems. And I've got a few facts that I think means that if we do either or a mix of both, we're not going to solve many problems and things are going to get worse. So it was just to try and get out there and have a really balanced, and if I may say so, slightly intellectualized conversation, which a lot of people want.
Indeed, indeed, and we'll try to stay on your level, sir. We're normally
We
just very
really will.
we will try to stay on your level. We're kind of just like backdoor basement podcast style, but we do nevertheless our message, and we do like to do like genuine chats and get people's opinions. And obviously, if there's a professional, we're open to listening to it. So let's start with you a little bit. So you grew up in Norway. What was that like being in a sort of? I imagine you stood out in a crowd growing up in Norway.
Yeah, I did, but that's sort of the key thing. So if you look at my old photos of my football team, I had a totally different name to all of them, called Stein Vidar and Emil Østenford, and I was just called Andrew Wade. They all sort of looked like bleached blonde hair and etc. But I was treated fine. I was just treated like a Norwegian kid because I went to school and spoke Norwegian. I scored more goals than them playing football, so pretty easy. So growing up in Norway was great because you've got really good outdoors. You ski to school in winter. If there's 2 feet of snow, there's no problem. And I suppose being a child as well, Christmas was quite magical. You have really proper Christmas trees and a lot of snow. So I really grew up. I really enjoyed my childhood. And
You mentioned skiing and stuff like that. Is that a norm for everyone, or is that something for more the people that may be a little bit more well-to-do in terms of their background and stuff?
no, it's for everyone because
Okay.
you have skis and you put your skis on outside your back door and you ski to school and then you meet other kids skiing to
Wow.
school on route. So yeah, it's
That's
good. And
just
then
amazing.
That
you
is
just integrate with nature, whether it's -10 or +25 degrees. So if a lake freezes, you just skate on it in December.
wow.
Yeah.
That sounds you paint
Idyllic.
yeah, it does. You paint a picture and it's just like, wow, that sounds amazing. You never hear about that. I mean, I've spoken to some African people that have said that they had to cross a swamp, cross crocodile infested water and stuff like that to go to school. Like, it's only a little bit of water, but you just got, like, someone one, and then like if you see a elephant, or if you see a what to do if you see certain animals and stuff like that. I've heard those sort of adventures and stuff. But yeah, skiing to school, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Kitty, I
absolutely.
know you had a few questions for Andrew. I'll let you fire away with the first one.
No, I mean, I just find it really refreshing that when I listen to you, like Brucey said, that we get the facts. I love that. I'm a sponge, right? I love to listen to things and I love to be educated. Why did you want to do that? Why did you want to, give the facts? Because most people just, this is my opinion, but
Yeah, I think to be brutally honest, I've heard a lot of interviews with people, and I'm just screaming at the TV. Now, I think he does some good stuff, but I'll give you a great example. Although he's not the politician I bag the most, Nigel Farage was interviewed, and he was talking about the population explosion, and he said because of this, traffic's terrible. And I said, well, if we hadn't spent 60 billion on HS2, and if we'd spent that, then I'm sure on other things, I think our infrastructure would have been better. And he sort of says, of all the immigrants that came last year, only 18% work. And I said, yeah, I know that is true, but of the 900,000 immigrants that came to the UK in 2024, 400,000 of those, so almost 50%, are foreign students. They pay 2.5 times the university fees that UK students do. So almost 50% of immigrants, in effect, subsidise UK citizens to live. They subsidise them, so our UK citizens who go to university don't have to study. He misses that out and just says only 18%, or I think only 18% work. But it then suggests, oh no, sorry, I think he said 23% work, which suggests then that 77% of immigrants are financially dependent on UK citizens. But
yeah,
when you throw in that almost 50% of them are university students who pay 2.5 times the level of fees. I've spoken to university professors. It actually then gets to that only about 33% of the immigrants are financially dependent on us. So it was more being critical of a lot of things, and he's not the only one.
no,
So I think
I mean, but
it's I feel a lot of things are misleading.
sorry to interrupt you, but that is just a fantastic point to just put out there to people that that 50%, like Nigel Farage is saying, 23%, only work or whatever, and 50% of them are subsidising, the education of nationals in the country. That is a mass. I don't think you'll hear that anywhere else. So
no.
that is
This is what I'm
that,
saying.
this is the reason that
Exactly.
I needed you on here.
No,
Yeah,
and then another point to make is if you say that, then people who are absolutely gung ho about what camp they're in, they say, okay, but then the problem is all the dependents they bring. And I said, that's fair enough. But of the 400,000 students that came last year, they brought 18,000 dependents. However, the demographic of those foreign students changed since Brexit. When Brexit happened, the amount of foreign students from the EU literally halved overnight. And because we're financially dependent on them, we then had to get students from Nigeria and India who then have more of a culture of bringing across dependents to come and live with them. So it's because of Nigel Farage that the demographic of foreign students has changed, and they're bringing more dependents with them.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
wow.
I suppose it just doesn't suit the narrative, does it? With someone like Nigel or any politician really, they have to sort of sell their narrative, don't they? And like you say, what I think is, like you say, refreshing is to get the information, to have the fact,
Yeah.
to be able to answer the question when somebody says, from the right, they're coming over here and they're taking our jobs, or they're using our benefits. Well, actually, no. Andrew
Almost half of
says,
them are subsidising our living. So
yeah,
I then ask, okay, do you have a child? Are they going to university? Do you want them to be 100 grand in debt when they finish, or 45 grand in debt? Well, I actually want neither. But
yeah,
if you didn't have those foreign students, they'd be more in debt. I mean, it does then go on to the fact that we need to change our education system. But Kitty, exactly as you said, it's what's being reported can be a bit misleading. But he's not the only one who does it.
Oh
Yeah,
no! I when I said that, I definitely meant every politician, because they all have their own agenda of what they want to get across,
for
and I
sure.
think I think certain, they will spin the story so that it goes their way. It's always going to be that way, that they wouldn't have spin doctors otherwise, would they? They wouldn't have these sort of people.
It's sort of the dog whistling kind of tactic, isn't it? Sort of, you just sort of whistle, you speak in a certain tone, and you get the view, you get the vote that you need, and they know what they have to do. Nigel Farage with Brexit, what was it? He had his famous bus, 400. If we get Brexit, if the Brexit happens, we're going to save 400. Was it 400 million a week or something
I
crazy
think
like that?
350 million a week.
350 million a week or something like that. Did we get that?
When Brexit happened, I was a European sales manager, so I was working for a UK manufacturer selling goods into Europe.
Yeah.
And what I'd say is really, really sad about it is a lot of people were complaining about immigration, and we haven't solved immigration, and we lost the seamless trade with Europe. So pre-Brexit, you could just get an order from continental Europe and you just send it out the door, right? You just send it out. With Brexit, we then lost that seamless trade. So delivery time, the administration went up, which meant admin had to occur. So the delivery times to Europe went up. So it really hurt small businesses. Businesses then had to invest in sort of warehouses in Holland. So they sort of had a wholesaler in within the EU, so they could ship goods, and from then that distribution warehouse, they could then send orders to France, Germany, and all over the EU quickly, putting in stock there. But if you were a small business and you couldn't do that, you then were faced with long lead times. So I personally can't understand how we've done. Well, I do understand it's because we lacked a vision of what the post-Brexit world was going to be. I've never done a negotiation where you haven't sorted out what you're complaining about, i.e. immigration, and you've lost a clear advantage.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make no sense that people are like these. Like, it's actually making you feel a lot more sicker now when you actually just sit there and you watch politicians just tell lies, just blatant lies, and they're not held accountable, especially in this country. They're not held accountable. Like, Nigel Farage, he campaigned on Brexit, he done all this work, and then as soon as we got it, he left, and I think it was like a £10 million donation from a billionaire, from a former BNP billionaire as well. So it's kind of disgusting. And then I was listening to Joe Rogan talking to who was he talking to? The old guy that was running for presidency, but he'd lost it. What was his name?
Joe Biden.
It wasn't Joe Biden. It was the other guy. What was his name? Bernie Sanders. Yeah, it's Bernie Sanders. Joe Rogan and Bernie Sanders were talking, and Bernie Sanders was saying, Trump was given 200 million by this person, 200 million by that person, and then Joe Rogan came out and said Kamala was given £1 billion by like, in campaign contributions and stuff, and it's just like. These people, they get their money from these superpowers and these elites, and they're literally just puppets. Like, and our politicians, in our country, it's even worse. Like, everyone's just a puppet, and God forbid, if they catch you doing something compromising, then you're in their pocket forever. And I feel like this is literally where we are now. It's just like everyone, like even an idiot, can see that something's going wrong. Like, they're saying that we're like, just start with the boats, for instance, letting people come in on the boats and stuff like that. For me, if the government really wanted to stop that, they would stop it. They're not stopping it for a reason, and I believe that reason is really sinister. And we are going to see I feel like we got some bad times coming our way, and these politicians, they just don't seem to have a moral conscience to what's going to happen. And when you say that as well, you see what's happening in Palestine and Gaza, and you're seeing people just openly willing to just blow things up, blow buildings up with children in there. Like, I'm seeing tents with children walking around set on fire. Like, this should be a wake up call for people that human life doesn't matter to certain people. Like, it doesn't matter. Where does it go?
I threw another example the other day, really, really simplistic, about this inquiry into rape gangs. I said, well, to me, it's very, very simple. This is obviously going on. And I said, immediately, especially in the northern of England, we need military patrols when schools come out. Because whenever you talk about getting the military involved, people say, oh, is that really a good use of time? And I said, well, if that prevents, sorry to be really graphic, but if that prevents 13-year-old girls being stalked and gang raped, then putting 5,000 soldiers on the street at 3:30 or 4 o'clock is worthwhile. So again, I can't understand why is there an inquiry. It's exactly as you said. If you're really horrified by something, you have something in your power to do something,
Yeah.
and that's one of the worst examples. But there doesn't seem to be action. And again, on your point about people being in the pockets of the people who fund them, I mean, Boris Johnson was just continuously funded by Lord Bamford from JCB. I don't think he served the people at all,
No.
basically. And so you've got this tricky situation that I was saying the stuff that I'm launching because I'm intending to stand at the next general election is
Oh,
the
thank God.
advantage. Sorry?
Thank God, because I was sitting here thinking he's got to do something.
No, I mean, I had a great. I'll go into lots of examples. In that, I'm just going around talking to people and then gathering a lot of information and putting stuff out there. The issue with not being funded is it's expensive to fund yourself, and it's a full-time job. But I'll give you another example, just because I don't want us to just focus on Nigel Farage. That would be harsh. I'll give you a prime example. So last year in 2024, £1.2 billion was added to our electricity bills to pay wind farms to switch off while it's windy. That's because wind farms have been built in areas in Scotland where there's low demand for electricity and we don't have the grid capacity. Because they've got contracts of difference, which they basically say, right, we're just going to pay you a certain price for everything that you can produce. They then say, well, if you can't take the electricity when I can produce it, you then still have to pay me. And if you look at it, when Ed Miliband came in, he keeps saying, oh, we're on the roller coaster of fossil fuels. That's why the electricity prices are going up. 3 months after he came in, he approved another 18 wind farms to be built in Scotland, where we don't have the grid capacity to transport that electricity from where it's produced in Scotland to where it's needed in England. And the biggest one he has approved is one right next to a wind farm. It's Cloysh wind farm. It's right next to Stronelairg wind farm, which was paid hundreds of millions last year to switch off while it was windy. The worst example was the third highest, the wind farm, which had the third highest curtailment costs. Last in 2024, I had to be paid to be switched off while it was windy. Was Viking Wind Farm. It's part owned by SSE Renewables. That has the capacity to generate enough electricity for 500,000 homes. They built it on Shetland, a remote island with a population of 23,000 people. So it's no surprise that at some stage, 23,000 people don't need what a wind farm with a capacity for 500,000 homes can generate, and so they get paid to switch off. And that same company, SSE Renewables, is building the biggest wind farm that Ed Miliband approved in September 2024, and it's next to another wind farm in Scotland that we've had to pay to switch off last year. So Ed Miliband goes on talking about a rhetoric about the roller coaster ride of gas prices, etc. In my opinion, he's just basically lying. But he's just approving more wind farms to be built, where we've either got to spend then another 108 billion goes onto our electricity bills so that we build all the cabling so we can use that electricity, or we just pay even more on our electricity bills to have them switched off.
So what do you think? What do you think's going on
I
there?
was just going to ask the same question. What do you think's behind it? Who do you think he's got some sort of he's involved in these wind farms, or he's involved in possibly the moving of it? Like, do you think there's a conspiracy behind it?
What I'd first say is, I think with this going on, the public should see who the major shareholders of SSE Renewables
Yeah.
are, because they're the wind farm. I'll give you one example. They also own Seagreen Wind Farm, an offshore wind farm, and the estimates are last year, Seagreen Wind Farm earned £104 million in revenue to generate electricity that households and businesses used, but they earned £264 million to be switched off while it was windy. So they earned 2.5 times as much revenue from us, the British public, to be switched off while it's windy, because we don't have the ability to transport the electricity from where they're producing it to where it's needed, compared to what they earn to actually produce electricity for households and businesses. So it's the same wind farm operator building the ones in the wrong place, and they're earning a lot of money to not be switched off. But that money goes on our bills from National Grid when balancing up the grid.
I mean,
I would.
you're painting a picture, and we don't have to be rocket scientists to understand what's going on. Obviously, someone is receiving backhanders. Like, that's the only answer. Like, if you've just broke it down and explained that it's costing the taxpayer all this, like, all this money is why, like, and obviously it's the only reason why, the only logical reason it's happening is because someone is being paid to allow it to happen. It's that simple,
Or
and this is
or
where
one
it's
of them's
going.
a shareholder, or one of them's a
Yeah, they're receiving
shareholder.
financial benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if some of the donors are shareholders,
Yeah, of
or,
course.
or something. I mean, unfortunately, by the way, I'm a very cheerful person. By the way, I have solutions to all of these things. So the first, just to backtrack slightly, is the first solution is, which suits a lot of industry, is you could. First thing you do is you get the list of the wind farms where we're paying them to be switched off because we don't have the grid capacity to move that electricity. In Scotland, we produce vanadium flow batteries, which can store electricity. You'd first find out where vanadium flow batteries could be installed. And it could be something like you use £200 million worth of taxpayers' money to build these vanadium flow batteries, which could reduce the constraint payments, the wastage, by 800 million. Now, every taxpayer would say, look, if you're going to spend 200 million of taxpayers' money and you're going to reduce my our electricity bills by 800 million, that's fine. So
I mean,
just to go back one step, that is a solution. I don't know how viable it is, but I've been in touch with the company who does make these vanadium flow batteries, and they said, yeah, in principle, our product is fine for that.
Yeah.
So there is a solution there.
I mean, there's always a solution for something, and there's common sense as well. Like, I didn't understand a lot of what you said, but for me, if I'm looking at it, if I'm in charge of something like that, and we're talking about, spending money and saving money, I would you hire the smartest people. You say, right, why are we building these grids? They're costing us 200 million. Like, how much money are they generating to taxpayers? If it doesn't benefit us in a financial way, it's just costing us money and costing us more money to keep them going. That don't make no sense. Like, it's kind of like Doge, like, where Elon came in with Trump, and he said, look what we're spending money here, we're spending money there. There's 10 million here. There's 500 people that are being paid here. Like, it just goes back to my old point that it's just corruption. The world is corrupt. The elites run it. And what a question for you, good sir. I know you said you wanted to run the general election. What party would it be? Sorry.
So initially, I'm going to call it the Core Values Party,
Okay.
because one of the core values is that the British taxpayer should be treated as if they are a paying customer of the government and should therefore receive value for money.
Sounds like good basic principles to me. So this is a party that you intend to sort of establish soon, is it, and launch, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's I do believe I've got some unique selling points. So my background's in international trade. So I've got some really specific things that I could put into action immediately on international trade. I've got a former army officer who did 2 tours of Afghanistan, who's interested in standing as well. He would be the defense secretary. I've got a guy, he's a little bit older, but his grandfather was a doctor pre-NHS. His mother was a doctor. He's a liver specialist. So he has all the ideas for restructuring the NHS. And then I've got some other people who I'm in discussions with. But you get the idea that we're wanting to do something where you're not funded by millionaires. You're not the puppets of the donors, exactly as you said, and you've got people with relevant experience. I'll give you another example. The government came out with an industrial strategy, and they said, "Oh, we're going to reduce electricity bills for certain manufacturers starting in 2027." I could do that in 2025 with what I've just told you about installing vanadium flow batteries, for example. And I immediately, they're all screaming that small and medium-sized manufacturers are not being listened to and there's no industrial strategy for them. To be honest, our industrial strategy is all about selling more defense. So selling more missiles and defense-orientated stuff, or attack, war-orientated stuff. But I was out in Africa years ago, and I sold on a big construction project. I was in Kenya, and I sold a load of UK manufactured equipment of brands that the client had never heard of. They stopped buying Chinese because we gave them 1 year payment terms. 5 years later, they said, buying all those UK goods brands I'd never heard of, they lasted 15 times longer than the stuff we've got from China. That was the best purchasing decision we could have made. So I wouldn't have delayed talking about an international strategy, I then said, well, what the government department that supports exports, UK Export Finance, they need to do a certain product. At the moment, they base all the loans that they back for African buyers based on past performance. They don't look at future cash flow. That's a product you need. I'm now going on the ground to do deals. These 10 manufacturers in Derbyshire, in Devon, in Warwickshire, they're all going to benefit. We crack on. I don't need, unlike Labour, I don't need to do reviews. I just say what the policy needs to be, and then you go out and do deals.
Wow.
Where do you see yourself then in 10 years' time? Do you see yourself as the next Prime Minister of England?
Number 10.
I would hope so in 10 years' time in number 10, although I'll be 56 in 10 years' time. So my ambition really is now, from what I'm starting to do, is to stand in politics
Yeah.
and either have a cabinet position in something where I'm strong sort of international trade, because I said I don't need to do reviews. I'll just go out and do deals that will benefit British industry, and also get across that narrative that not all manufacturing is going to China. British goods, although they're more expensive, they cost twice as much, but last 15 times longer. That's a good selling point, basically, and then either then really influence industry really, really positively in Britain. And I think the main message from me is, I know things look bleak, but there are people out there with solutions who want to give some idea of prosperity and good feeling and reverse the narratives that we're hearing. So I'd really like to do something very impactful that impacts British businesses and makes life better for people. I'm not trying to sound holy, but
Yeah.
it's just things are
I,
just going the
Do
other
you know
way.
when I hear you speak, you sound very like passionate. You sound very like you want to do the right thing. And I've been listening to a lot of like people talking in terms of like when they start out in politics, they start out with the best intentions, but then you start getting chipped at slowly. You start like someone will tell you to bend the rule slightly here, bend the rule slightly there, and then before you know it, you've come with like like how uncompromisable are you? Like imagine you get to a stage where you're about to set up your party, you're about to launch and everything, and then someone's from another party says, "Come and join us. We've got a position for you. Here's £10 million on certain deals or whatever like that," and then it's like, do you continue with all that hard work that you've been doing, or do you sort of take the money? And then obviously once you've taken the money and you've done a few uncompromising small things, because it's normally always small things like a house that you don't declare or something like this is how they normally get people. And then as soon as that person decides they want to stretch their wings and fly away by themselves, they get plucked, because obviously, wait a minute, in 2018 you done this and you done that. And how do you stay? How do you sort of like, because everyone
Thank you.
has great intentions, but like obviously real life and obviously the dangers, like some of the stuff you've spoke about, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of big companies out here will probably listen and think, Jesus, this guy's talking about stopping £100 million worth of money, like or going to my farms or whatever, that I've been fleecing from the government for years. So it's obviously it's not an easy thing as well. It's quite a dangerous thing as well. Someone might see that and think, bloody hell, you've got some. You might, like that guy that went to check for weapons of mass destruction before we went to Iraq.
Yeah, really, really good question. So people have already said to me to join other political parties, and so far I've said no, because I've just said I just don't agree with things that they're saying. So I'm managing to stand firm on principles. I think one answer I would give you is I've spoken about this very topic to very close friends of mine, and I've said, if that sort of looks to happen, you've got to pull me aside, because my experience of politicians is, which was quite amazing, was I went to some international trade events when when I can't remember which prime ministers, when Boris Johnson, Liz Truss were in power, and the backbenchers, the backbench conservatives that I met, who you won't have heard of, they were fantastic, but most of them have left politics basically. So I think you're right in that they reward loyalty and people who step a certain line, and not really good, fantastic people who then leave basically. So I would say historically I'm pretty good at sticking to my principles. And secondly, with all my close friends, I've said, if I start looking to slide, then you've got to clip me by the ears and pull me back into line.
Yeah.
The only sort of counter I'd say to that is, the feeling I get from talking to people is, people are hugely in demand for a sort of a center
They are.
movement.
Yeah.
The centre always sounds unsexy because the far right sounds sexy in that immigrants are making your life terrible, and the left are all blaming rich people, and these guys have destroyed your lives. I'm personally seeing a huge demand for centrist politics.
I think we are. I think we want change because
I think
we're, we're 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 not idiots. Like no, like we're not even the most stupidest of biased person now is looking up and seeing like like the government will tell you that they've got no money. There's no money whatsoever. There's no more money to do this. The government's broke and stuff. And then you hear about them sending weapons over to this country, weapons over to wasting money on this. Like so much waste like is happening. And the only reason that waste is happening is because someone is allowing it to happen. I can't believe that everyone's just incompetent or stupid. It's being allowed to happen for a reason because most likely it's all back down to money. Like pharmaceuticals, like pharmaceutical companies. A lot of people are saying that have the guts to say it. Like they spend a lot of money on treatments rather than cures. Like treatments
Yeah,
rather than cures, and it's to save money. And
exactly. So on pharmaceuticals, for years, the amount of people in the UK with type 2 diabetes has been going up. There's so many simple things that you could do, but no one's been doing it because they're thinking, cool, let's keep this going up. And yeah, we're working on a fat jab, exactly an obesity jab, and fantastic. Those ultra processed foods, keep sending them out,
yeah,
keep making them cheaper, etc. Exactly, and then they'll cash in. I mean, again, a great point that you made on that wastage was here where I am in the Midlands, a little way away, is you see how the HS2 construction has absolutely just changed the countryside for the worse. I released a video a few weeks ago and I just exposed something on HS2 which I've seen firsthand. I wanted to sell some secondhand excavators to a project in Africa years ago. And I went in and I looked at the telematics system and it said operating hours 3,500 and then it said usage hours 700. That means for the 3,500 hours that excavator's ignition had been on, it had only been digging for 700, right? So what happened was the Conservative government gave the contractors cost plus contracts. So they said, you do that bit of HS2 and just submit all your expenses and we'll give you 10% profit on it. So the guys in the subcontractor says, lads, jump in those excavators, turn the ignition on and leave them running all day with no operator inside, no productivity, because we can claim all the fuel back. Now on that one excavator, I did a rough sum, and the amount of diesel used while the excavator wasn't digging was £44,000. That's the income tax of two people earning 75 grand a year just went for one excavator. I told a builder friend and he said, yeah, my son works on HS2. He drives an articulated dump truck. It needed servicing the other day. So he drove it in, and while it was being serviced, he sat inside it with the engine running. So the hour meter on that day had run for 8 hours, and they could charge the British taxpayer 8 hours, but he'd only been working for 4 or 5 hours. 3 hours of those were just sitting in it while it was being serviced. Within 24 hours of me releasing that video, 2 people contacted me and said, yeah, I was by HS2 on the Foss Way. I saw 4, I think 4 dumpers just with the engines running, no operator inside.
I mean, it doesn't sound like you. I mean, it sounds like I said. They go back to it. It doesn't. This is something that's like if we're spending money, if the government are spending money, and the taxpayers is coming out of taxpayers' money on things like that, and you've just articulated like that people are fraud in the system, basically, like in £40,000, whatever it is. Did you say an hour or something like that? Or...
No. So let me do it. It was I worked out. It's on my video. On the telematics system, you can also see the average fuel consumption was 10 litres per hour.
Okay.
So, of course, that's going to be a little bit higher when it's digging compared to when it's just idling. And so then you multiply 10 litres per hour by the amount of time that it had not been digging, which was 2,800. So that's 28,000. And then you multiply it by the cost of diesel. And this was 4 years ago during the start of the war. At £1.50 a litre. So you have 2,800 hours not digging. Average fuel consumption 10 litres an hour. That's 28,000 litres. And then the average price of diesel £1.50. So 28,000 multiplied by 1.5 which is 42,000. So yeah, roughly £42,000 of diesel cost while the excavator wasn't
I
digging.
mean, I
It's
mean,
just shocking. It's just absolutely shocking. But I mean, Brutty's been saying it for absolutely ages. He just wants money out of politics completely. And it's so refreshing to hear somebody that not only sees the problems, has answers.
Yeah, so the first thing I say is, look, you've got to stop the abuse of contracts on HS2 and on the wind farms, right? Forget painting this rosy picture. I mean, if you want to get to net zero, you should not have excavators and dumpers on HS2 just with the ignition running while there's no operator inside. So that's the first point. So it's got to be exactly day one. If I was Prime Minister tomorrow, I'd say, right, those contracts, we're going to put huge fines in place. When we're going to reduce the amount of compensation that they can get, the expenses they can claim for fuel, because I know this has been going on, right? I just know it's been going on. Then on the wind farms, you cancel certain ones, etc., and then you go in and put the vanadium flow storage batteries in certain wind farms. So I sometimes get quite frustrated because I'm sitting at home with solutions that I think could make a really good impact for British people. And to go back to your point, why I'm doing it was, I think historically everyone got by, but in the last few years with what's been going on, I've been seeing so many of my friends of mine affected by this. I took a 60-year-old lady out for lunch. Her landlord sold up and she got a great relationship with her landlord. She's working, but that gets topped up with universal credit. And now, because obviously from years of the government's freezing things and also the cost of living crisis, which was partly self-inflicted by government policy, she doesn't have sufficient earnings to get housing anywhere. She was stressed as anything. And at 60,
No, it's not the time.
she's now juggling 3 jobs and she's okay. She found
yeah.
things. I mean, that's just one of many examples. I see so many good people who are decent, honest, hardworking people. They don't expect to be multimillionaires. They just want to be
It's not a
reasonably
comfortable
rewarded for hard work.
life.
I
Be it
think
being
most British people want to be comfortable. That's what pretty much everyone would say. I want to be comfortable. But let's look at some just basic sort of issues that are out there at the minute.
Awful.
One of the biggest issues we've been speaking about at the minute is they call it white flight. You know, in the UK, so people leaving communities because too many black or brown faces move in, so they're moving. They leave, like, you know, Kitty's from Nottingham. She's spoken about it a lot. The demographic has changed a lot in her area, and you know, one of the things that my opinion has always been the same. You know, if you just leave your area because a few black and brown faces move in, what do you expect is going to happen? The demographic of the area is going to drastically change, and you're just going to get you just like, you know, for me it's I just don't understand it, how you just leave your area. There's only so many homes being built. Like, you know, there's a shortage of houses being built. So there's only so many places there's only so many people they could put in one area. But if people are just leaving one area and the demographic sort of shifts in that area drastically over 20 years, what is the answer to that? Like, you know,
Can I just put forward what I said in return? What I said in return to that is that because of the left, we're now all afraid to say anything about anybody of any colour, and we're afraid to make complaints. We're afraid to complain because all of a sudden we're a racist, or the council then move us, or and this is the situation because the right is doing their job and the left is doing their job, and nobody is down the middle helping anybody that just wants to live a happy and quiet life. That's my argument to it all.
Yeah. Look, it's such a good point. It's hard for me to give a perfect answer because I played cricket on Sunday. We've got about 4 skin colours in that team. I've drafted in a really talented 16-year-old lady. We don't need to use gender neutral nouns or anything. We just crack on. I mean, we frequently have about 4 different skin colours playing, and it's just all 11 of us onto one pitch, try not to drop catches, giving 100% for other people. We all socialise in it. Again, we've got a bucket with ice bucket of beers, but I showed it to the 12-year-olds. They go in, get a can of Sprite out, sit with us at a tea. So for me, it's quite difficult because I genuinely am always in groups where skin colour doesn't matter. Again, my girlfriend's brother, he's in an all-male couple, and I go and visit them. And on the 3rd time that I visited them, they had to drag me aside and they said, "Andrew, you don't make any comment that we're a same-sex couple, and I said, well, no. He was just. I'm a James Bond fan. You were just telling me that you went to that James Bond island. You're back to back like Roger Moore and Christopher Lee with Scaramanga. Tell me about that. I couldn't give a damn about stuff. So to get to your issue, I think it's a really if people move in and they don't integrate, then I do think we've now got to be firmer about people needing to integrate. If you think, I lived in France and they've got laïcité, which is secularism, which means you're not allowed to wear a turban.
Yep.
You're not allowed to show any religious signs. I personally think that's going too far. But if people don't integrate, I think we should now be a bit harsher on them. One thing I had is we played once 13 years ago. We played against an all-Muslim cricket team, and I thought, well, what if someone else said, I've got a cricket team and it's whites only? That would be a bit weird. And it was, and we then have a match tea in the middle of it. And they said, guys, can you guys hurry up? We've got Ramadan. And I said, well, match tea is part of our tradition. We bring a community together. So I thought in that regard, I know this is a very mild example, but it was disrespectful to say that we have to hurry up and have a 5-minute tea because it's Ramadan. If we were in Dubai, I'd understand. I'd understand that. But when we're in the UK, so I think, Kitty, to your point, you're absolutely spot on in that we firstly got to be a bit harsher if people are not integrating. Look, I've lived in 4 countries and I spoke the language in all of them.
Wow.
So
I think because if you're serious about running for getting to that final stage, getting to number 10, this is a major issue. Like you've seen Reform, the amount of votes they've how their parties changing and stuff. They're getting a lot more attention, and the immigration thing is one of the biggest. I would say to the people that don't have as many options in terms of going and just buying a house somewhere and just moving somewhere lovely. The people that don't have those options, one of the biggest problems that people are having in this society right now in the UK is, immigration. Don't get me wrong, there's always going to be the people, the extreme far right hiding in there, like peeking and saying, yeah, it's because of this, it's because of that, it's because of this, hiding like that. Like this, unfortunately, that's the spinelessness that we have in this country when it comes to our far right. They don't ever, no one just admits that who they are. They want to lie, and they've lied to themselves for so long, maybe unconscious bias and all the rest of it. But that's kind of what we see in this country a lot. People just don't want to outright say it, but then the same people pushing the argument, they're the ones that will show you pictures of Poland and videos of Poland, say, look at this lovely society, and what they're alluding to is obviously it's all white or whatever, in certain parts, and yeah, go.
Yeah, it's such a tricky issue. What I would say is a lot of people who are advocating the high tax society, they say, look at Scandinavia. Norway and Sweden had all these immigration problems 20 years ago. My Norwegian and Swedish friends were saying, so they were the most lax for refugees, in that if illegal immigrants landed, they just wouldn't send them back. So the floodgates opened and people really started to come 20 years ago. But what was really interesting for me was I then spoke to a taxi driver in Stockholm, and he said this is certainly 16 years ago. He said he wanted to live in London. I said, why? Because he says, here, unlike how I describe myself in Norway, is I look different and I'm treated as different. I just can't somehow integrate. So what I would say is some of these supposedly idyllic countries, they've got real problems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know the final answer. I think it's a mix of answers. So, I mean, I mentioned it in one of my videos, Cutting the Welfare States. On the one hand, British people have to accept that then they have to do certain jobs. I mean, my girlfriend went to Reading Hospital. I thought I was going to be served a rum punch. Everyone was from Barbados in that hospital, right? So if all the hospital workers, if you want less immigration, that's fine. But you've got to go fruit picking in summer. You've got to work for the NHS. You've got to work in care homes. I think you've got to, again, put across that balanced argument, which I've got to say isn't that popular. It's a really polarized debate. People seem to be saying either let them all in or we hate everyone. So I think you've got to put that across. How that would win votes, though, with our polarized society would be the issue. So you say, we've got to do that. Then we cut then we cut down on immigration.
Yeah.
And we're also going to lay out a framework that if people aren't integrating, I don't know, we're going to send them home or something.
It's really difficult, isn't it? Go on, Key.
I mean, Bridgie and I have literally had this conversation time and time again. You know, like this, it's got to be paid, not paid work, but you paid benefits as such. You've got to work for that benefit. If you are able to work, you will come in, and whether it's litter picking, whether it's, sort of just do something, cleaning the streets, old people's home. Bridgie and I have had this conversation over and over and over again. But then there's no DBS check,
Right.
because these are people that have come in, and you don't know who they are. So you then, if you're putting them into old people's homes, they're with our vulnerable. So
Kitty, you're spot. You've got to have a lot of caveats to that. So a couple of things I'd say is the way to actually have a really good and successful country is just copy best practice from around the world. And if you look at people who live in Dubai, they get their national ID card, and you have to have a job, and there are various things you have to do. If you lose your job, you're effectively then on a 90-day tourist visa, right? You have to find another job within 90 days. I'd do a slight different twist on that, in that a national ID card would then be really useful, say, for the NHS. You get emergency care, of course. If you're run over in the street, you get emergency care. But if you don't have an ID card and haven't paid into the system, you don't get elective care. Whereas the government are going against that by sending in NHS staff to these hotels, which is, of course, enraging the population. So I think, Kitty, to your point, is you've just got to then think of how people can bypass various things. But I'm an advocate of it. My video on the fact that you leave pensioners alone, you leave the disabled alone, because they are not capable of changing their circumstances.
No. Yeah.
Everyone else, you split them down into demographic, and you don't get benefits without some form of productivity. If you're a parent, then you can only do less hours. That's fine, but you still have to do some productivity.
Yeah.
And exactly that's what I put on my video: litter picking, fixing roads.
100%. Everyone. I'm sure some people in some stage of their life will need some sort of help from the government to give them a little bit of respite for whatever happened. People go through trauma, people have accidents, all things happen. But then the problem is what we're talking about, and I do believe this is the majority. There's too many people that are just saying, I can't be asked to do that job. I'm too good for that job. I'm not doing it. I'll prefer to stay on benefits and have my life sorted for me. That is the major problem in this country. We need to get the people that are sponging off the system, like you said just a second ago. If you are claiming the benefits, then you need to be doing some sort of other government help that sort of helps us make some money or something. Do some phone calls at home, get some call centers going or something. There's no. I think we should take away the fact that people can just claim benefits and do no work whatsoever.
No.
I'm in 100% agreement, because I put it on my video. You've got we're 3 trillion in debt. Today, the interest payment on the national debt is 310 million, right? That's the interest, and it'll be that 7 days a week. We've got a working population of 33 million and 12.5 million pensioners. When you've only got 2.5 working people for every pensioner, you can't have a load more dependents. Another one that I put in there is if there's some unproductive land, for people over 50 who say that they've had to have a hernia operation or something, get those people out of work on sickness benefit to turn that unproductive land into an allotment, right? So you've got two things. You've got social activity. I'm convinced that a lot of young people have got mental health issues because they're not in communities. They haven't played team sports. The internet has ruined them, to put it quickly. But then you're in a community. You're not totally reliant on benefits for your weekly shop, because you can take produce from an allotment as well. And I personally, I'm 46. I'd love to do something like that. And then you can put on your CV that you did something from scratch. You then worked out a little business. You sold a little bit of that to a restaurant or something, etc. And then you've got something to show employers when you come back. But I think I heard a story of a taxi driver had to have a heart operation, and his benefits were almost the same as working a 40-hour week taxi. So it's fair enough. If you're on benefits, then you work a 40-hour week on an allotment, And then you think, well, actually, I'll
That,
go back to my previous.
that is it. But unfortunately, what happens with that is a lot of people are doing that. They're taking that decision to just stay at home and say, no, what, look at these mugs working. I've got my rent paid. I've got everything paid. I'm blessed over here. And then, but the thing is, all they're doing normally, most of them aren't being productive at home either. So they're just sitting at home, swiping, scrolling, looking at things that they can't have and they can't afford, never will be able to afford. It's just making them angry. And then who do they blame? They blame some brown person over there. It's your fault. My life's shit, and and it sucks. It's your fault. Your bloody turban. I can't see your bloody eyes. I can't see your face. Like, this. Unfortunately, it's funny. But it's sad. This is what it is. People, like, you're seeing the poorest of poorest people, and this is what I have to go back as well. When you have the poorest of the poorest people, the people with nothing, and then you bring in a load of immigrants and shove them in a hotel with the lights on. Unfortunately, that does incite madness, and you're seeing it in Ireland right now. I've spoken to a lot of people out in Ireland, and the areas that they're putting the guys in is areas where people are dead broke, like the poorest of poor, and people are being the landlords are being incentivized to house them over UK citizens as well. So that's obviously another massive issue. So people are being effectively booted out of their houses, and then then they get put in. Some people would argue, though, some people might argue is that you're on benefits, the government's paying for you, so we don't necessarily. And I feel like the government are getting hard-handed. They're saying, right, look, you're moaning about you're British, you're white, this is your country and all the rest of it. You're not working, you're not contributing anything. Your mum never worked, had 3 kids. Your dad never worked. The daughters don't work. It's generational, and these people don't contribute to society. They're just sponging off people and moan it. And immigrants are coming here, like you said, paying twice as much in student fees, subsidizing our guys. And then you got people that I've met a lot of people. I've been brought up in London, all sorts of areas, and I've met a lot of people that have come over from certain countries. I've never ever spoke to anyone that said I'm coming over here for benefits. Like, I've never spoken to anyone. I've
Yeah.
never spoken to anyone from it.
My friends from South Africa got a young family. They want to avoid the violence. I think the guy who's a teacher, there's a couple, he had to give up his South African pension for some reason, and they had to pay 5 years national insurance contributions up front before they could get here.
Wow.
And they just don't want their kids to see the violence of Johannesburg, basically.
No,
Yeah.
I understand.
So yeah, it's. I don't have all the answers, but one of the answers is the government has got to stop fueling the fire, because they're just encouraging these things. The stuff you saw in Ireland is absolutely disgraceful, but you knew that at some stage something's going to happen because of the feeling, the tensions building up.
But unfortunately, this is where we go back to my original point. It's being done on purpose by certain people that are in charge of stuff. The real people that are in charge, if they, for whatever reason, whatever agenda, most likely it's probably money, or they want to incite riots, they want to incite mayhem. Like, I don't know what it is, but these, it's just like you don't have to be no politician. You don't have to be a smart person. If you've got an area of poor people and they're all on benefits, and then you stick a whole load of people that they don't know from another country in a hotel next to it, even worse, start booting people out of the house, what do you think is going to happen? And these people know this before it happened. They planned it just like that. Nothing happens by mistake. The elites run the world, and they're playing poker with people, with normal people's lives. My thing is, if you lot are stealing our money anyway, like, don't even bother making viruses that poison us, then have to create a vaccine to charge us loads of money. Don't even bother doing that. Don't even bother making up wars and doing that. Look, just take our money. You take our money. I'm sure we'll all give it away for a better life. Just take
You
our
don't
money.
have to come up with some elaborate scheme.
Don't say that would be it. And I think it would be a much more peaceful world. There are scumbags out there that just obsessed with money, that have more money that can spend, and they want it. They just love it. They're greedy. They're scum, and they incite riots. They incite wars. They incite all sorts of things. And what do we do? We just give.
Well, you know it now. In the if there's a case of an illegal migrant in some crime, be it rape or murder, that is just going to incite absolute
That's it.
chaos.
Just one. Not 2, not 3, not 10, not 10 in that million. Just one. And there's an issue, and it shouldn't be that way. But people are just angry and crazy. and also as well that unconscious racism as well, because funny how as soon as that Liverpool driver was identified as a white guy, there weren't no riots. I was looking forward to a riot, damn it. Like I
What's
wouldn't.
one
Where were the riots? If that
Yeah.
guy was black, if that guy was Asian, if that guy was anything, like, if he had a little twang in him, like Kitty's half a little bit of Asian in her, like, well, you're half Asian, aren't you? Your mum's
Yeah,
Asian,
half.
yeah, so half
Good
Asian.
half.
So unfortunately, that unconscious racism that we're seeing at the minute is kind of apparent. We're seeing it, like, a big thing is, we saw the war in Ukraine, and you saw the reporters, and the reporters were like, these people look like us. She looks like me, and they're dying. Like, it's just as blatant as obvious as you can see. Like, they're used to seeing brown people blow themselves up and fight, but seeing white people blow up white people, that's something else. We can't. That hits the heart differently, and it just goes to show you, and it just makes you wonder, like,
Do you not think it's divide and conquer? Divide and conquer. Literally make it so it's right and left, and then we're too busy fighting while they're just getting all the money and just doing what they want.
Yeah,
That's
look, I've said this for years. I mean, the way the media likes to polarize issues I've always found that there's got to be that agenda that we want polarized on everything. I mean, for me, Brexit was the prime example. I'm saying,
Yeah.
you actually go around and talk to people, 75% of people want the same thing, right? They want the free trade, they want some controls on immigration, but then one's going to vote one way and one's going to vote the other. But 75% of people wanted the same thing, and that 75% of people haven't got what they
No.
actually wanted. So yeah, Kitty, I agree with you on that they want to polarize us, which I think is very sad.
Sorry, Kitty. Kitty. We've had Andrew for an hour. I think we agreed about an hour or so.
Yeah, I've got so many questions.
It's been great speaking. It's been great speaking to you, Andrew. But we'll just wrap it up with a final word from Kitty, and then yourself afterwards. Kitty, go for it.
When you do become Prime Minister, I want you to change the school curriculum, because I want to instill British pride. And that is not about colour, that's not about religion, that is about living on this island and making a living for yourself. So going out and not wanting to sit on the sofa and watch TV all day, that they want to go out and do some work, and how to do it, and how to pay bills, and how to do. Just teach them pride.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think one brilliant start of that is you learn your history. So I think September the 15th should be Battle of Britain Day.
Yeah.
But so you teach them the history, but you also teach them that the squadron that shot down the most German fighter pilots in World War II was Squadron 303. Polish pilot. It was the Polish squadron with
Yeah.
Czech pilots, right? So you can teach them a huge amount about our history. We were the only country that entered World War II, not because we were invaded, but to try and defend other nations as well. So you build those values as well. And instead of blaming someone why you're in a bad position, teach people inspirational stories of what people have done. I mean, you can pick so many people, people with disabilities who've then become great athletes or something, a huge amount, and so teach that proactive nature, because our education system needs a huge amount of change. I'd also add that you need to know how to. I couldn't until my 30s. You need to know how to run your own finances. And also, there need to be more team sports. Just to answer your question, one of my things was I walk past private schools here on sunny days and they're empty. Lots of great facilities not being used. Instead of charging VAT on private schools and making more exclusive, bring in special education needs children with autism who've got one amazing talent to. Rather than make it more elitist, let's get more people using those facilities. Let's have former army veterans running things so that they learn teamwork and leadership, because I think that's a huge problem now, that the youngsters aren't integrating as much. But I mean, I could go on for another hour, but I agree with you that the education system, we actually now need a system that really teaches some core values, which is why I'm calling my party the Core Values. But
I get it now.
yeah, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Andrew I've had several guests. I've had priests. I've had everyone. I've had a mixture of everyone on the show. It's been a pleasure having you on, Andrew. I will put all your tags in here. Make sure everyone goes over and follows you. It was truly a pleasure just to sit and listen to some of your ideas, and I hope in 2 years' time or 3 years' time we're not pointing to look Andrew. He's joined that party, and he's one of them. He's sold out.
You're going to keep me to that, but
Oh.
I really like that, actually, because we say as well, it comes to one of my policies that you should have a part insurance for the NHS, because if you miss an appointment, then you have to pay more the next year. And it's another fault in our society that people don't stick to their promises. So I really actually like that you're laying down that marker, because that's another old-fashioned value that we've lost. People say yes, 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 and then cancel on people last minute. It's another value that I think has really gone in our society as well. That you should be. I rent this property. I do business. I don't need a contract with my landlord, because for 5 years, what we say, we do, and not enough of that happens.
Andrew, a pleasure having you on. I'm sure
Thank
it's the
you.
first of many interviews. I thank you very much, everyone.